This video is every single World Cup final explained. Let's go! 1930. The very first World Cup final was played in Uruguay, in just 3 stadiums within the country's capital, Montevideo. We played this very first final in front of 68,000 people. There, it was the host Uruguay who took on Argentina. And we had our first dispute. Literally. Both teams wanted to provide their own match ball, and FIFA had to intervene with a compromise. The compromise is that Argentina provided the ball for the first half and Uruguay for the second. The football preference showed on the pitch. At halftime, Argentina was in a 2-1 lead, including a goal from this World Cup's top scorer, Guillermo Stabile. But in the second half, the Uruguayan ball was on the pitch, and it showed. The hosts scored 3 goals with no response from the Argentines. In the end, Uruguay won 4-2 and became the very first World Cup champions. 1934. For the second World Cup, we're going to Italy, who are going to play in the final and also are governed by a dictator, Benito Mussolini. Yeah, you know where this is going. What a brilliant opportunity for some national propaganda, or Benito himself influencing the tournament by selecting the referees for some matches. Uruguay decided not to partake in the tournament as a protest against the European teams not going to their country 4 years prior. So Italy's opponents in the Stadio Nazionale in Rome are Czechoslovakia, who eliminated Germany in the semi-final and had a top scorer in Oldrich Nejedly, who scored 5 goals in this tournament. Also, did you know this final was played in the 40-degree heat? And there is one more problem for the Italians. Czechoslovakia took the lead in the 71st minute thanks to Antonin Puig. The Italians fought back though as Raimundo Orsi equalized just 10 minutes later. With no more goals in final minutes, we had the extra time. Just 5 minutes into it, the forward Angelo Schiavio scored for Italy, and for the second time in a row, the hosts won the World Cup. Damn, I really wanted Czechoslovakia to win this one. 1938. This time, we went to France, and Italy made it to the final again. And Uruguay did not even partake, citing a slightly controversial Olympic Games quarterfinal between Peru and Austria hosted in Berlin in 1936, in which the Peruvian fans invaded the pitch in the 119th minute and it led to Austrians being given a walkover to the semi-final. I mean, it's very easy to connect the dots here. Back to the World Cup. In Colombey, today's suburbs of Paris, Italy's opponents were Hungary. This World Cup was not played in Italy, and so the players had to kind of win it on their own. Benito Mussolini could only send a telegram wishing the Italian team well. However, the rumor was that it sounded a little bit different, but in 2001, Italy's then left-back Pietro Rava stated this line was just an urban myth. In the final itself, Italy took the lead just 6 minutes in. The Hungarians equalized 2 minutes later, but since that moment, Italy dominated. Squadra Azzurra scored 3 more goals, while the Hungarians only added 1. This meant Italy became the first nation ever to defend the World Cup trophy, and they won both of them under the guidance of the coach Vittorio Pozzo. Part of the reason why Hungary lost this final can be attributed to their goalkeeper Antal Szabo, but not for a bad performance itself. Antal heard the news of the telegram, and after the game, he declared that he may have let in 4 goals, but at least he saved the lives of the Italians. You can clearly tell how tense the political climate was around that time, and it would unfortunately lead to World War II breaking out in 1939. We had to wait 12 years for another World Cup, which happened in 1950. Because of the damage caused by the war in Europe, the World Cup had to be played in Brazil. And you probably know what is going to happen. It was inevitable. This World Cup was played in Brazil. Brazil, which had an amazing squad with a top scorer of this edition, Ademir, who scored 9 goals in total. The Canarinhos were destined to win. Weirdly enough, this World Cup technically did not have the final. The 1950 edition had a final 4 of sorts, a group of Brazil, Spain, Sweden and Uruguay. And whoever would win this group would become the winners. But this World Cup also did have the final. Because of how the games prior to the final match day turned out, Brazil only needed a draw in this sort of a final against Uruguay. This only built the excitement of the nation, and the team was already declared as the world champions way before the game by the media. A reported 200,000 people watched the game in Maracanazo in Rio de Janeiro, in an arguably the most attended game in football history. They all turned up to celebrate their national team claiming the title. Surely Brazil dominated their rivals and claimed what was already theirs. You see, Uruguay had some other plans. Early on the day of the final, Uruguay's captain, Obdulio Varela, bought as many copies of the newspaper O Mundo as he could, took them to the dressing room and ordered that the entire team destroy them. After the coach Juan Lopez told the team to play defensive football, Obdulio stood up and changed the tactics and delivered an emotional speech which motivated his teammates, who wanted to prove the world wrong. The game itself was going according to Brazil's script. 47 minutes in, Friaca opened up the scoring, although Obdulio Varela argued with the referee that the forward was offside. Seeing he won't win the argument, he took the ball to the center circle and motivated his team again. And guess what? 66 minutes in, Uruguay equalized. And in the 79th minute, Alcides Gigia took a near post attempt. Brazil's goalkeeper Barbosa anticipated a cross, so he left that near post unguarded and let the ball in. Uruguay won. They defied the odds and won the World Cup for the second time. And for Brazil, it was heartbreak. They lost the surely won World Cup in front of 200,000 people. It was the game that went down in history with the name Maracanazo. The goalkeeper Barbosa was single-handedly blamed for this loss, to the point he once was given the goalposts from the stadium as a present and instantly burned them. He also wasn't invited to meet the Brazilian team in 1993, citing that he would give bad luck to the team. 1954. We're now going to Switzerland, and there we're about to meet possibly the greatest team in football history, the Hungarian national team that was called the Golden Team. Prior to the World Cup final, the Hungarians went 32 games unbeaten, playing flexible attacking football, and with the stars being the goalkeeper Gyula Grosic, a winger Zoltan Cibor, or the forward Sandro Kocsis, who became a top scorer with 11 goals, and Ferenc Puskás. On the other side of the stadium in Bern, in front of 62,500 people, was West Germany. These two teams already met in the group stage, where the Hungarians absolutely demolished the Germans 8-3. Even though there was not nearly enough build-up to a sure victory, you could still expect Hungary to win. And you could definitely expect Hungary to win after they scored 2 goals in just 8 minutes. In case you definitely expected Hungary to win after they scored 2 goals in just 8 minutes, you did not learn from 4 years prior. The West Germans already made it level in the 18th minute. From that point, the teams exchanged chances and played attacking football, but neither could score. Until the 84th minute, when Germany's Helmut Rahn took the ball in front of Hungary's penalty area and scored for 3-2. Hungary tried to fight back, and they did, as Ferenc Puskás equalized. Except he was allegedly offside. This is still being disputed to this day, as there isn't any camera footage that is clear enough. With the final whistle, West Germany won, ending Hungary's unbeaten run and subsequently Hungary's golden team, which basically ended with the 1956 Hungarian uprising and many players fleeing the country. 1958. We're in Sweden now, and Sweden is also in the final. In Rasunda Stadium in Solna, part of Stockholm, the hosts played Brazil. After just 8 years, Canarinos have a chance to redeem themselves for the Maracanazo. They want to redeem themselves so much that they banned themselves from playing in the white jerseys, instead rushingly buying the blue ones somewhere in Sweden. Despite that preparation, Brazil still conceded 4 minutes in. However, Brazil's Vava scored 2, Zagallo added 1 more, and there's also this guy called Pele, who scored a brace at just 17 years old, including one of the more spectacular goals in tournament's history. Sweden only scored 1 more goal, and it means Brazil finally won the World Cup. But will they defend the trophy in 1962? This time we're in Chile. Pele was ready to win yet another World Cup with Brazil, but unfortunately he got injured in the second group stage game against Czechoslovakia. Brazil still made it to the final that was played in Estadio Nacional in Santiago. Guess who did they meet there? Czechoslovakia, the same opponents they had in the group stage. This time around, the Czechoslovaks played in white jerseys, and the Maracanazo flashbacks showed up again when Josef Masopust scored 15 minutes in. However, just 2 minutes later, the goalkeeper William Schroif, who was previously flawless in the World Cup, made an error, allowing Amarildo to score. And in the second half, Zizo and Vava added 1 more goal each. And so, Brazil successfully defended the World Cup crown. 1966. Football is coming home. No, but literally, we're in England now, and England created football, and they were underwhelming at best during the World Cups with just 2 quarterfinals prior to 1966. Can't really blame them though, they refused to partake in the first 3 World Cups. So of course, as they were the hosts, they made it to the final. England's opponents? West Germany. This final was a bit of a back and forth game. Germany's Helmut Haller opened up the scoring, and Geoff Hurst equalized just 6 minutes later. Late in the game, Martin Peters gave England the lead. This made Germany push for an equalizer, which Wolfgang Weber found in the 89th minute and forced the extra time. In the extra time, we saw one of the most controversial moments in World Cup history. Geoff Hurst took control of the ball from a cross and blasted it into the goal. The ball hit the crossbar and Geoff scored. Or did he? Or maybe he didn't. Or maybe he did. At least Tofik Bahramov, an assistant referee from Azerbaijan, said that Joff scored, and the main referee Gottfried Dienst declared it's a goal. In the 120th minute, Jeff Hurst scored from a counter, and with that, he secured not only his own hat-trick, first one in the World Cup final, but also England's World Cup win. Football really came home. And the credit for this also has to go to England's manager Sir Alfred Ramsey, who deployed a wingless tactic for this tournament, and it helped make history. 1970, and we're going to Mexico now. 4 years prior, Brazil's Pele suffered a series of falls and was forced out of the tournament yet again due to an injury. This time around, the loss was too big of a blow for Brazil, who were eliminated in the group stage. But now, in Mexico, Pele had his last World Cup, so he had to deliver. Ultimately, Brazil made it to the final. In Estadio Azteca in Mexico City, they met Italy, for whom it was the first World Cup final since 1938. But let's be honest, it was Brazil's very own show. Pele opened up the scoring 80 minutes in, and although Italy's Boninsegna equalized before half-time, it did not stop the Canariños from scoring 3 goals in the second half, with the final goal scored by Carlos Alberto being one of the most spectacular team plays in football history. Brazil became the very first team to win 3 World Cups, and so they got to keep the original World Cup Jules Rimet trophy, which was stolen just 13 years later. It was also a crowning achievement for Pele, who became the first, and so far only, player to win 3 World Cups. He will not win any more of them though, he stopped playing international football a year later. The manager Mario Zagallo also became the very first person to win the World Cup as both the manager and the player. And you can also become a subscriber of my channel. Just click that button below. 1974. We're in West Germany now, and you may have realized throughout this video that the hosts do quite well in the World Cups. You guessed it, West Germany made it to the final, but it should have been Poland. It should have been Poland. But of course we had to play the game against West Germany on literal water, and there was also this minute of silence for an Argentine president during the match when it already kicked off, and we lost 1-0, and we really should have won this World Cup. We are this good. There's this Polish football iceberg if you want to watch it later. Anyways, in the Olympiastadion in Munich, West Germans took on the Netherlands. The Dutch came to the tournament with Rinus Michels as their manager, who introduced the nation, and therefore the footballing world, to a concept of total football. Total football assumes there isn't something called a fixed position for the player, and that any outfield player can play anywhere, all while playing a very attacking game. Oranien's biggest star was undoubtedly a forward Johan Cruyff, and he proved it in the final. In the very first minute, Cruyff won a penalty for the Dutch, which was converted by Johan Neskens. The Dutch were meant to play attacking football, but for some reason they went defensive in this match. And this is where the West Germans caught them. Still in the first half, West Germany won a penalty, which was converted by Paul Breitner. And by halftime, the hosts were already 2-1 up, as the forward Gerd Müller scored in the 43rd minute. The Germans kept that result all the way to the final whistle, and so, after 20 years since the miracle of Bern, the Mannschaft are on top of football again. And the Dutch, they will have another chance to take the crown just 4 years later, in 1978. This World Cup is hosted by Argentina, a dictatorship type of Argentina, governed by a military junta under President Jorge Rafael Videla. The junta that decided to influence the World Cup by having Argentina get some favorable referee calls, or even worse, enforcing that Argentina play their matches last in the group, knowing all the previous results, with the most notable example being the final game in the second group stage against Peru. Brazil played Poland a few hours before and won 3-1. Because of that, Argentina had to win 4-0 over Peru. Argentina won 6-0 over Peru. Absolutely not suspicious at all. You guessed it, Argentina was in the World Cup final against the Netherlands, and it wasn't a good final at all. It was an extremely hostile match, with fouls, crowd troubles, and even Rene van de Kerkhof's wrist being a reason for an argument between the referee Sergio Gonella and the Dutch team. In the game itself, Mario Kempes opened up the scoring 38 minutes in. For a long time, this was the only goal of the game, but with 8 minutes to go, Dirk Nanninga equalized. The game went to extra time, in which Mario Kempes scored from a deflection and became the tournament top scorer with 6 goals. With 5 minutes to go, Daniel Bertoni scored the third, and, well, the military junta got exactly what they wanted: a World Cup on their home soil. Let's just move on, honestly. This wasn't an enjoyable World Cup at all, and let's be honest, we should have won as well again, but we did not. Simple as that. So it's time for 1982. Now we're going to Spain, and for the final, we're going to Santiago Bernabeu in Madrid. There, the two nations that met were Italy and West Germany, and for one of them, it's going to be the third World Cup win. Although we have to mention how West Germany advanced from the first group stage together with Austria. Algeria qualified for its first ever World Cup and landed in the group with West Germany, Austria and Chile. Algeria also delivered an upset with wins over West Germany and Chile and was about to advance to the second group stage. But West Germany and Austria played their game a day after Algeria beat Chile. The two teams found out that they can advance as long as West Germany wins with a 1-0 or 2-0 result. So, 10 minutes into the game, Horst Gruber scored for West Germany and the game practically ended with little to no effort from both sides. So this is that scar on Germany's reputation in this tournament. Although I can't really blame them, at least it led to a reform stating that all final group stage games must be played at the same time now. The final itself was Italy's concert. The top scorer Paolo Rossi, Marco Tardelli and Alessandro Altobelli all scored a goal each. The Germans could only reply with Paul Breitner's consolation goal late in the game. This meant Italy became the second nation to win the World Cup 3 times. Italy's win also made their goalkeeper, Dino Zoff, the oldest World Cup winner. Dino was 40 years and 4 months old at the time. 1986. We're in Mexico for the second time. And guess what? For the second time in a row, West Germany made it to the final. However, this time around, Italy was knocked out in the round of 16. So who made it to the big game? Argentina, with their star player Diego Maradona. Diego Maradona, who became quite famous for a quarter-final against England. That's because in this game, Diego scored 2 goals within just 4 minutes. The first one was, well, very slightly controversial. Yeah, Diego used his hand to score, and the referee did not see it. But the other goal was, well, one of the greatest goals in football history. Yeah, Diego just dribbled past half of the England squad, including the goalkeeper Peter Shilton. Absolute cinema. But what about the final itself, played in Estadio Azteca? The Argentines were the more dominant side, which resulted in them taking the 2-0 lead by the 56th minute. It looked like Argentina were on the way to their second World Cup win, but the Germans fought back, as Karl-Heinz Rummenigge scored in the 74th and Rudi Völler equalized in the 81st. And this is when Diego Maradona shined. Just 3 minutes after Germany's equalizer, Diego assisted the midfielder Jorge Burruchaga, who scored the winning goal in a 1v1 against goalkeeper Harald Schumacher. Argentina won their second World Cup in 8 years, and they did it based solely on football. And the hand of God, as Maradona called it. There is a chance for Argentina and Diego to win the World Cup again, just 4 years later, 1990. We're in Italy now. And also, now it's a perfect time for the first ever direct rematch in the final. You guessed it, Argentina, with Diego Maradona still in the lineup, played West Germany again. Now, one thing I forgot to mention about the 1986 final is that it had the most yellow cards so far, with 6 in total. The 1990 final did not beat that record, with only 4 yellow cards. But why do I keep talking about the cards? Because the 1990 World Cup final is called one of the ugliest World Cup finals. It was defensive, it was ill-tempered, it had controversial referee decisions, and for the first time ever, we saw a red card in the World Cup final. And the second as well. The two players who were sent off are a defender Pedro Monzon and a forward Gustavo De Zotti, both playing for Argentina. West Germany had a huge advantage during the entire match, and they finally converted it in the 85th minute. How, you may ask? Of course it was a penalty, scored by left wing-back Andreas Brehme. With this victory, Germany took revenge on Argentina and lifted the third World Cup title, and became the third nation to do so. Germany's coach, Franz Beckenbauer, also became the second person to win the trophy as both the player and the manager. This is also the last time we'll ever see West Germany in any World Cup, as they would reunite with East Germany just a few months later. 1994. We're now going to the United States, where Germany lost out to Bulgaria in the quarter-final. But the Bulgarians did not make it to the final. Instead, we saw Italy and Brazil take on each other in Pasadena, near Los Angeles. This game had quite a lot at stake. Both Brazil and Italy have 3 World Cup wins each, and whoever wins in Pasadena will be the first team to win it 4 times. This was a historic World Cup final not only before the match, but also during it, for a very simple reason. It ended with a 0-0 draw. In the extra time, it was still a 0-0 draw. So, it's time for the very first penalty shootout. This shootout is known for one attempt in particular. After 4 rounds, Brazil was in a 3-2 lead. This meant Italy's 5th taker, Roberto Baggio, had to score to keep Italy alive. Baggio played an excellent tournament in the US, scoring 5 goals in total. Surely he kept Italy in the competition, right? Roberto Baggio skied the shot and it made Brazil win the 1994 World Cup. Roberto stood on the spot for 8 long minutes, and he just had the worst moment of his career. Although, you can't really blame Roberto for his miss. Kind of. He already was playing this final with a pulled hamstring, and as he recalled it, he felt a shock of pain in his leg as he kicked the ball. So he was actually injured when attempting to score. And as you may know, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, so we have to respect Roberto for trying. But what about Brazil? The Canarinos broke the record of most World Cup wins with 4 to their name now, and they will have a chance to make it 5 just 4 years later in 1998. This World Cup is hosted by France, and you may have already guessed it. Brazil is in the final again, but who will they play? The hosts France played some stellar football, and with wins over Paraguay, Italy and Croatia, Leble made it to their first World Cup final. France achieved 2 third places in the World Cup before, in 1958 and 1986, but they did not even qualify for the 2 previous World Cups in 1990 and 94. Led by extremely technically gifted Zinedine Zidane, the French were ready to complete their own redemption arc. On the other side of Stade de France near the capital city of Paris, there was another superstar, Ronaldo Nazario, who was a complete forward and one of, if not the best in the world at the time. Except he wasn't on the other side of the Stade de France near the capital city of Paris. The reason for that is not funny at all though, as Ronaldo felt extremely unwell just hours before kickoff. So, with 72 minutes until the kickoff, he wasn't in the starting 11. But just literal minutes before kickoff, Ronaldo was on the other side of Stade de France near the capital city of Paris. He made it to the stadium, insisted he was fine, and the manager Mario Zagallo made him start. This unfortunately greatly affected the Brazilian team. Ronaldo himself started quite well, just missing one opportunity 23 minutes in. But just 4 minutes later, Zinedine Zidane scored from a header, and then he did it again just before half-time. And despite the centre-back Marcel Desailly receiving a second yellow, and therefore a red card in the 68th minute, Emmanuel Petit scored the third. This was a symbolic goal for France. It was the goal number 1000 for France. And also a special goal, because it secured France's first World Cup victory, and they did it on their home soil. This was France's big moment, especially big when you consider what happened in 2002. First World Cup in Asia, by the way, South Korea and Japan to be exact. Oh, about France. France lost 1-0 to Senegal, drew 0-0 to Uruguay, and lost 2-0 to Denmark. Yeah, Leble were out in the group stage. But Ronaldo Nazario and Brazil will have a chance to take back the trophy after going all the way to the final again. Oh yeah, Ronaldo Nazario, he had probably the worst 4 years of his career in between the 2 World Cups. While playing for Inter Milan, Ronaldo suffered a terrible knee injury in 1999. He was out of the action for about 5 months, and unfortunately rushed his return. Just 6 minutes into his comeback, that same knee got an even worse injury. And this time, Ronaldo was out of the action for 2 whole years. He just made it to the World Cup. The injuries were so big of a talking point that Ronaldo found one and only way to make people switch the subject matter. He basically pulled up to the World Cup with this hairstyle. And it worked wonders. Ronaldo scored 6 goals prior to the final, where the Canarinos played Germany. In the match stats, you could say Germany had an advantage over Brazil, but Brazil still had a phenomenal team, with the likes of Cafu, Lúcio, Roberto Carlos, Ronaldinho, Rivaldo, and Ronaldo Nazario himself. Ronaldo scored 2 goals in the second half of the game and completed his redemption story. From the troubles before the 1998 final, to the disaster that was the 4 years in between, to lifting football's most important trophy, as Brazil lifted the trophy for the record-breaking 5th time. 2006. Germany lost the final 4 years prior, and now they can redeem themselves on their own ground. Or not, they were eliminated by Italy in the semi-final and ultimately finished 3rd. Italy made it to the Olympiastadion in Berlin, where they're going to take on France. Remember how Zinedine Zidane scored 2 headers in the 1998 final? Well, he's here too, and this World Cup final is going to be the very last game of his career. Just 7 minutes in, France won a penalty. Zinedine Zidane took it and scored with a lob that hit the crossbar on the way. However, Italy's Marco Materazzi headed the ball in just 12 minutes later and equalized. From that point, the game was roughly equal, with a few chances between each team. With the score still at 1-0, we had the extra time. In that extra time, France's Zinedine Zidane got a red card. For what, you may wonder? A handball? A foul? Zinedine Zidane had butted Marco Materazzi. But why? Versions vary, so I just said there's this paragraph on Wikipedia. You can draw your own conclusions from it. Despite being down to 10 men, France kept the draw and went to the penalty shootout. In it, we only saw one penalty miss. The one from David Trezeguet of France. This meant Italy secured their 4th World Cup victory. Zinedine Zidane scored and won the very first World Cup final, and Zinedine Zidane also scored, but lost in his last World Cup final. Maybe without that red card, France would have won. But France and Italy did not see what was coming to them in the very next World Cup. 2010. For the first time ever, we're going to Africa, South Africa to be exact. This World Cup became an insane struggle for the two finalists from 2006. So big of a struggle that both France and Italy did not even make it out of their groups. People of Slovakia still keep mentioning their 3-2 win over Italy to this day. But what about the final? In Johannesburg, we knew we are going to see a first-time winner. It's because Spain, who never finished higher than 4th, took on the Netherlands, for whom it was the third final. But was the third time the charm? The game in itself was by far not the charm. It was exceptionally ill-tempered and nothing short of brutal. The referee, Howard Webb, awarded a total of 14 yellow cards. But it's not the end. There should have been a red card for Nigel de Jong as well for this foul on Spain's Xabi Alonso. When it comes to actual football, it was Spain and their tiki-taka style that dominated the match. Spain relied on plenty of short and accurate passes to progress to the opponent's area, but it was the Netherlands with the chance to win the World Cup in the second half. Dutch winger Arjen Robben found himself on a 1v1 against goalkeeper Iker Casillas. However, somehow Iker stopped Arjen's attempt with his foot. For the second time in a row, we went to extra time. And for the second time in a row, we saw a red card. Netherlands' John Heitinga received a second yellow in the 109th minute. But we will not see the penalty shootout. With just 4 minutes to go in the extra time, Spain's Andres Iniesta scored the only goal of the game from a half volley. And with it, Spain finally won. A common saying about the Spanish national team was that they played like never before and lost as usual. With a Euro win 2 years prior, this World Cup victory, and another European Championship win 2 years later, we can well and truly say they got rid of any attachment to that saying. So just wait until you hear what happened in 2014. We're back in Brazil, and the hosts really want to finally win in their own country. We'll talk about it in a minute. That's because I also have to talk about Spain for a second before we move on to the final. Why? Spain was knocked out in the group stage. You heard me right. For the second time in a row, a title holder did not make it out of the groups. What a diabolical streak. Speaking about Brazil though, as I said, they're hosting the World Cup, and they really want to win it. This happened. And Germany's Miroslav Klose also became the all-time World Cup top scorer with 16 goals in total. Obviously, Germany made it to the final, where they are going to play Argentina in Rio de Janeiro. Argentina's Lionel Messi, you may have heard of him, he needs no introduction, was under serious pressure to win the World Cup, and was already compared to Diego Maradona, who won back in 1986. Lionel had to win to prove he can match Diego, but he only played a good first half. And it doesn't help that the forward, Gonzalo Higuain, scored an offside goal and wasted plenty of chances. Germany did not score a goal either, and so we're having the extra time for the third time in a row. And again, we'll not have a penalty shootout. In the 113th minute, Germany's Mario Götze received a cross from Andres Schürrle, took control of the ball, and scored the only goal of the game. For the first time since the reunification in October 1990, Germany can call themselves world champions. They did it after a series of near misses, as the Mannschaft was second in 2002, followed by 2 third places. Now, the Germans finally reached the top step. Because of Germany's victory, I also can say I watched the World Cup winner play from the stadium. I'm talking about Lukas Podolski, who joined Górnik Zabrze for the final 5 years of his career. But about the World Cup itself, guess what happened to Germany just 4 years later, 2018. We're in Russia, and we're starting a run of controversial at best World Cup hosts. Oh, and Germany was knocked out in the group stage. For the third time in a row, the title holder is knocked out in the group stage. Who will be able to break this curse? Well, let's see, because in Luzhniki and Moscow, the two teams that will play in the World Cup final are France and Croatia. Whilst France was quite expected to feature in the world's most important game, Croatia was the surprise package. Sure, they were good, with a side featuring the likes of Luka Modric, Mario Mandzukic, Ivan Perisic or Ivan Rakitic, but I personally did not see them reaching the final. The Croats genuinely struggled on their way to Luzhniki, with all of their 3 knockout games going to extra time, 2 of which ended in a penalty shootout. This showed in the final. Croatia's Mario Mandzukic opened up the scoring with a goal to his own net, although it was barely a deflection, enough to call it the first ever own goal in a World Cup final. At least Mario scored to the proper net in the second half, thanks to an error from France's goalkeeper Hugo Lloris. In the first half though, Ivan Perisic managed to equalize for Croatia, but it went downhill from there. Antoine Griezmann scored from a penalty and celebrated with a Fortnite dance. And in the second half, Paul Pogba scored from distance, just like Kylian Mbappe a few minutes later. The final result? 4-2 for France. 20 years after the World Cup win in their home, the French have done it again, with arguably their own golden generation. Croatia also played their best football probably ever, and despite the loss, they can be proud of their performance. Spoiler, those two teams will not meet each other in the next World Cup, so let's go to 2022. We're now in the Middle East for the first time, and Qatar to be exact. We're having yet another controversial host at best. About the World Cup itself, neither Croatia or France had problems going far in this tournament. In fact, Croatia finished third ahead of Morocco. And France is in the final again. The French took on Argentina. This was a match that revolved around two stars of the game. 4 years before, Kylian Mbappe became football superstar and scored a goal in the World Cup final en route to the win. Now in Lusail, he had a simple mission: carry the French to back-to-back titles. On the other side of the pitch was Lionel Messi. 8 years ago, he suffered a heartbreaking loss in the World Cup final against Germany. Now, as Lionel was already 35 years old, the comparisons to Maradona only grew stronger and bigger. Lionel had to win if he wanted to cement himself as the greatest football player of all time. Things initially went right for Argentina, as by the 36th minute, Albicelestes were already 2-0 up. With a quite secure result, Argentina kept shutting down any chances created by France, and it looked like a sure victory for the South Americans. Except 80 minutes in, France's Kylian Mbappe scored a penalty. Just 97 seconds later, Kylian added a volley, which landed in Argentina's net, and suddenly, the game was back on level terms. The draw by the end of the second half meant we're now going to extra time. In it, after a few chances missed by Argentina, Lionel Messi finally scored his second goal. The extra time was proper chaos, and one of the results of this chaos was yet another penalty for France. Kylian Mbappe stepped up and scored. Kylian also became the second player ever to score a hat-trick in the World Cup final. France could have genuinely won the game in the 123rd minute. Ranvar Kolo Muani hit a volley on a 1v1 against Argentina's goalkeeper Emiliano Martinez, but was incredibly stopped by the keeper. A 3-all draw meant we're going to the penalty shootout. In it, Emiliano Martinez did his best to distract his opponents, and it worked. Although Kylian Mbappe scored, two of the French players, Kingsley Coman and Aurelien Chouameni, missed. Argentinians scored all of their 4 penalties, and with it, they secured the third World Cup win. Lionel Messi has finally done it. Not only did he match Diego Maradona's legacy within Argentina, but he also surpassed it. With that World Cup win, Lionel Messi became the greatest football player of all time. Regardless of the result, I think this was the best and most entertaining World Cup final in football history. Although you have to keep in mind, I'm writing this script before the 2026 World Cup final, so you never know what will happen in the US. 2026. We're now in North America's 3 biggest countries: Mexico, Canada, and USA. There were plenty of teams with an ambition to win the whole tournament, but the two that got to the final were Argentina, and we almost had a rematch from 2022, but France lost 2-0 to Spain in the semi-final. Lionel Messi, a legend of FC Barcelona now playing in the American MLS, gets a chance to defend the World Cup, and his main opponent is a 19-year-old new star of Barcelona, Lamine Yamal. The first half of the final in East Rutherford near New York City was uneventful, apart from the fact that the Argentinians should have gotten way more yellow cards, and they only had 1. Just like in 1990, the Argentines wanted to defend the World Cup trophy by playing defensive football, for a lack of a better word. No, actually not. Their entire tactic was to try and wind up the Spanish players and everyone watching. In fact, for the full 90 minutes, we did not see Argentina shooting on goal even once. At least Enzo Fernandez saw a second yellow card right before the end of the regular time. Although, I'll be honest, I was watching this final and there should have been way more yellow and red cards for Argentina. And what about Spain? They could not score either. And so, we got to extra time. Right at the start of the second half of it, Ferran Torres finally opened up the scoring for Spain. Argentina tried to chase the result, but it came to nothing. And Spain became the World Cup champions for the second time. So, this was every single World Cup final explained, from the very start to the present day. Which final was your favorite? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next video.